Well, it's almost Halloween, and you all know what that means. It's time to grab a pumpkin, pour some gasoline over it, and light it on fire.
Yeah, that's the correct tradition.
Of course, this tradition isn't available to everyone, so for those of you that aren't pyromaniacs, you could turn to some good video games. And when I think of spooky, gothic video games, I think of the Castlevania franchise. Castlevania is, as of this year, kinda topical again. On the 7th of July, Netflix users saw the release of the Castlevania animated series by Frederator Studios. It was honestly a good watch, with admittedly a bit of wonky writing here and there.
Fucking a goat.
I feel that now a lot of people that have never played the games are getting into the franchise through this Netflix original, which I'm honestly happy with. When a new piece of media brings a lot of When a new piece of media brings a lot of new fans with it, there will always be older fans that claim that you're not a real fan if you haven't experienced the older material, or in this case, played the games. On one hand, I really don't want to be that kind of person, but on the other, I do really want you to play these games. But then the question is, where do you begin? The most obvious choice, aside from the original, which is a good game but also kind of bare bones, is to go to the animation's source material, Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, which is a solid game. It has multiple characters and pathways which add to the replay value, and a killer soundtrack filled with classic tunes. It's available on pretty much every Nintendo Virtual Console if I recall correctly, and it's not very expensive either. In terms of quality, this game is the best the franchise had to offer on the NES. However, it is also one of the hardest games in the entire Castlevania series. Enemy placements are harsh, controls are quite stiff, and some of the level design can be downright frustrating. The whole game is, actually, and because of that, I can't really recommend this as a game to start with. What I think is the best starting point for this franchise is Castlevania the Dracula X Chronicles for the PSP, the 2007 remake of the Japan-exclusive Castlevania Rondo of Blood for the TurboGrafx 16. This remake was actually the first time Western audiences got to experience Rondo of Blood without the use of emulators. There was also the SNES Castlevania Dracula X, or Vampire's Kiss, in Europe, but that port lacked a lot of things that made the original game so great. Still an alright game, but not on par with Rondo. Although, in my opinion, some of the music, weirdly enough, does sound better despite the limitations of the SNES sound chip. So what was it that made Rondo, and by that extent Dracula X Chronicles, so good? As usual, let's first talk about the story. This game stars Victor Belmont, a far descendant of Trevor Belmont, for those of you who watched the Netflix series. Dracula has been resurrected by a dark priest named Shaft, who also kidnapped 4 maidens, one of which happens to be Richter's fiancée, Annette, who is a giraffe person. So it's up to Richter to fulfill his destiny as a Belmont by storming the castle, striking down Dracula, and saving the 4 maidens in the process. That's basically it. When it comes to the older Castlevania games, story is never really the focus. It's usually very simple. You're a person from a family, you gotta stop that one vampire that's back at it again. Wait a minute, is that a JoJo reference? I can't fucking do this. Let's just talk about the gameplay. I think that this game provides one of the most refined Castlevania experiences I've ever experienced. When it comes to the Belmonts and other whip wielders, Richter has some of the smoothest controls of them all, barring Simon from Super Castlevania 4, but I think that one strays a bit too far from the rest and doesn't represent the rest of the series very well. Richter can strut, whip, jump, and do sick flips in mid-air, which can be really useful during platforming and avoiding stuff. Richter also controls great on stairs. That might not seem like a big deal to you if you're new to the series, but you should know that in the past, stairs were a nightmare. In order to climb them, you had to stand near them and press up, which often conflicted with sub-weapons which were used with up and B, and you couldn't jump on or off them, but in this game, all those problems are gone. Sub-weapons are now used by pressing the left shoulder button at the cost of 1 to 5 hearts. They usually provide you with a bit more reach than your whip, which in some cases makes enemies a whole lot easier to hit. Some bosses are an absolute joke with the right sub-weapons. You got daggers, axes, holy water, crosses, the Bible, and a stopwatch, but you can only carry one sub-weapon at a time. When you pick up another sub-weapon, your old one will drop behind you. Previous games didn't do this, which is another reason why this is one of the best games. At the cost of some extra hearts, Richter can perform an item crash, which usually cover a huge area of the screen and deal heavy damage, which again is great against bosses. Although I gotta admit, not a huge fan of the Hydro Storm's color, that's ew. Moving on from controls, let's talk about the stages. I think they're pretty well designed. For the most part, they're fair, especially when compared to some of the other games. Enemies and hazards are placed so that you have plenty of time to see them coming. When you die, it's your fault. Or because of knockback. That's still there. But aside from that ever so persistent problem, these stages are still great. What I like most about them, however, is that almost all of them have alternate pathways that lead to alternate stages. For example, by simply following the path in the first stage and beating the boss, you'll end up in stage 2, but if you break this wall over here and follow that path, you'll end up in alternate stage 2. The means to get to these alternate stages are not always very clear, however, so you might want to use a guide. Speaking of needing some help, here's a useful tip. Richter isn't the only playable character. By grabbing a key while being chased by this fucking nightmare, you'll eventually be able to open a door which leads to Maria Renard, the second playable character. Maria is a better character than Richter, control-wise at least. Writing...
I know you! You're the bad man!
No one knows what it's like to be the bad man.
She attacks by throwing boomerang birds, has a double jump, a slide, and a unique set of sub-weapons that are sometimes just disgustingly useful. Maria is pretty much this game's easy mode. Don't get me wrong, compared to the other games in the franchise, this game isn't that hard, but that doesn't mean it's completely easy either. But with Maria, you just go like... Moving on to presentation, graphics-wise, I don't really know what to say. The PSP was graphically somewhere in between the 5th and 6th generation of home consoles, and I've always found that early 3D graphics like that never aged very well. In some cases, it looks really good, with great attention to detail in the backgrounds, especially compared to the original, while in other cases it looks ugly and muddy with drowned out colors. Sometimes the graphics even hinder the gameplay. You see that? That's stairs. Stairs you're supposed to climb down to reach an event that's integral to getting the good ending. And I didn't even notice they were there the first time I played this. But aside from these kinds of problems, the game looks alright. Not great, but not bad either. You know what is great though? Guess. Fucking guess. Like, screw it. Bring out the funny screaming Asian man. The music is awesome. In fact, I think this might be the best Castlevania soundtrack, period, and that says something. The original tracks from Rondo were already amazing, but the remix tracks of the Dracula X Chronicles just blow them out of the water. The game even has a sound assign, which lets you choose which music plays where, and I gotta say, fighting Dracula with the original Divine Bloodlines in the background, some good stuff. Now if only you could also do that with Symphony of the Night. Oh right, I suppose I should elaborate on that. This game has a bunch of unlockable content, one of which being the original TurboGrafx-16 Rondo of Blood. Wouldn't recommend this port, however, as it has some major sound issues. Cutscenes don't sync at all and the music at some point just abruptly stops during gameplay. For another, much better unlockable, you gotta go to alternate stage 3, the cemetery. Go through the stage as normal until you reach this part. You need to attack this pot thing, causing it to fall down, allowing you to climb to the upper path. Follow this path and destroy the tombstone all the way at the end. You have now unlocked the PSP port of Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Ah, Symphony of the Night, where the vampires moved gracefully, the Belmonts could Shoryuken, and the skeletons shot lasers out their cocks. This game brought a massive shift in gameplay with it. Instead of linear platforming, the new style combines huge interconnected labyrinthine maps with RPG mechanics in what is now known as Metroidvania, a term which this game coined. A lot of fans consider this game to be one of the best games in the franchise, if not the best, and while I haven't played all Castlevania games, I will say that this one's really good, especially as a starting point for Metroidvanias. Symphony of the Night sets a lot of standards for future Metroidvania titles, so if you decide to play the other games, you'll know what to expect. This game is a direct sequel to Rondo of Blood. You play as Alucard and you need to explore the castle to find Richter, who went missing a while back. Alucard has great controls and is extremely versatile when it comes to attacking, which makes the game very easy and comfortable for inexperienced players. Although I will admit it sometimes becomes a bit too easy. But that's what self-imposed challenges are for, I guess. The castle he explores is huge and all the areas are pretty varied. You got the main hall, an alchemy lab, caves, a clock tower, and even a chapel.
This castle is a creature of chaos. With each rebirth, it takes a new form.
Wait, does that mean that the meat in the walls is like the actual meat of the castle? Hello Internet, welcome to... What really helps bring forth the feel of these areas is the overall presentation, which is once again amazing. The background art looks beautiful and the sprites are animated pretty well, especially for PS1 standards. And the soundtrack is once again amazing, and pretty varied too, although in the later parts of the game certain tracks do get used a lot, which is what I was referring to earlier. All in all, this game is great. It's a wonderful inclusion to the already great Dracula X Chronicles, and both this game and the game it's packaged with are great starting points for both playstyles of the Castlevania franchise. If you don't own a PSP, the original Rondo of Blood is also available as a WiiWare title, but you gotta be quick with it because the Wii shop is closing and you won't be able to add credits after March next year. Symphony of the Night is also available on the PlayStation Network. It's the original version, which has a few differences from the PSP port, namely the voice acting and the fact that you cannot unlock Maria as a playable character, which I forgot to mention. So, in conclusion, if you're ever interested in the Castlevania series and don't know where to start, maybe give these games a try. And if you like them, try the rest of the franchise. Most games are worth at least trying out, and you might even find one you like more than the games I just recommended. And with that, happy Halloween, and do not light pumpkins on fire with gasoline. I made that up. That's not an actual tradition. Don't do that. Please.